Hi all, class is set to start soon. I'm going to hand over to Neo, who's going to be your teacher for today. Can I please ask that everybody be very respectful in the comments and only use the chat box to answer questions or to pose questions of your own towards the teacher? For anything other than that, I will mute your chat. And I will also only unmute the chat while your mics if you have a question or anything related to the lesson. Enjoy your lesson, guys.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. Are we all fine? All right. So today we are looking at the last topic of Natural Sciences Grade 5, and it is the last topic in Term 1. Remember, this whole week we've been doing revision, and because of that, we've been looking at different things that we've already done in Term 1. So I was just doing revision, but now we're going to look at the last topic, and the last topic of this term has to do with the following. So at the end of this lesson, you should be able to know how plants and animals get their food, be able to define the word photosynthesis and understand what photosynthesis is and how it works. 3, know what a food chain is and how to draw one. So I hope everyone has a pen and paper today, because you're going to need to draw food chains so that we can see if you know how to draw the food chains. And lastly, you'll have to know, or you'll learn and know the general life cycle of a plant and an animal. So we are beginning with this. So how do plants eat? So yesterday when we ended the lesson, I gave you a very interesting question, and I asked, is a Venus flytrap an animal or a plant? We'll get to that now. But firstly, we need to know, how do plants actually eat? Plants, most plants do not have a mouth, they do not have a stomach. So because of that, they need uh, they need another way to make their food. So green plants, so mainly plants that are green will do this. They make their own food through the process called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. And it's a very difficult word to say. It can be a tongue twister at times, but I've tried to make it easy so that we can be able to define what photosynthesis is. The word photo means light. So wherever you see the word photo, you must know there is light involved. That's why we take a photograph, because then you need light. If you take a photograph without a flashlight, especially in the dark, then your picture doesn't come out nicely. So the word photo means light, and the word synthesis means process. So overall, this is what photosynthesis is. Photosynthesis is a process that plants use where they use energy from the sun, they use water, they use carbon dioxide from the air, and nutrients from the soil to produce their own food. So there are 3 things that plants need in order for them to undergo photosynthesis. One, they use energy from the sun. 2, they use water, which is coming from underground. And 3, they use carbon dioxide. So that is what those 3 things are that are needed by plants to make their own food. Why do plants need food? They need food because of the following. They need to grow, just like we also need food so that we can grow. Plants need food so that they can grow. And 2, they also need food so that they can build strong stems and branches. That's why trees are so strong, because they can make their own food, and that is how they actually get to grow and build themselves up to be as big as they are. Now, next, we have a new word. This new word is a word that we use to define, it's a word that we use to define plants. We call them producers. So the word producers is a word we use to define plants, or to talk about plants. So plants are what we call producers because they make their own food. And next, we have the word have plants make their own food mainly in the leaves. So the leaves is the main place where plants make their own food. They make their own food mainly in the leaves. And why the leaves? Because the leaves are the green parts of the plant. And remember, we said photosynthesis takes place in the parts that are green. So that's why we need to have photosynthesis, because the plant needs to make its own food. And for that to happen, it needs all the green parts of the plant. Next, we're going to look at how exactly do plants make their own food. And this is the process of photosynthesis. This is the process called photosynthesis. So we're going to look at exactly how do these plants get to make their own food. One, they take in energy from the sun. So you can see the arrow is coming in. So they take in energy from the sun. They take in carbon dioxide from the air, and they take in water from the soil through the roots. So if it rains and the water is on top of the leaves, that water does not go inside the plant. It's only taken into the plant if it goes to the roots. So that's why plants need to have roots, or plants are in the soil, because in the soil, that's where they can get their nutrients. And at the end of the process of photosynthesis, there are two things. There are two things that will come out. One, oxygen will come out. Oxygen will come out at the end. And oxygen is what we call a byproduct. So these two things that I'm about to talk about are what we call the byproducts. So they are the things that come out at the end of the whole process of photosynthesis. We get these two things. We get oxygen, and the oxygen, the main reason there's oxygen is so that we can breathe. Last time when we were looking at interdependence, I asked what do animals need plants for? And the first thing we all spoke about was the fact that animals need plants so that we can breathe. And that is one thing that comes out at the end of the process of photosynthesis. Another thing that comes out at the end of photosynthesis is something we call food. And this is the food for the plant. So at the end of photosynthesis, the plant will make its own food. Now, animals, on the other hand, they do not make their own food, and we call them consumers. So a consumer is an organism that does not make its own food, but it's an organism that goes to actually eat something else or eat from somewhere else. For example, with us, we go to the shop to go buy our food. And at the shop, we are called consumers because we are eating and we are buying and taking from somewhere else for us to eat. So that's what a consumer is. So all animals are called consumers because they eat, or they eat from other things. They eat from other things. Animals eat food for the following thing. They need to get energy. So this is the main thing we get when we eat: energy. For us to do these life processes, for us to eat, for us to move, for us to grow, for us to excrete, for us to reproduce, and for us to breathe, we need energy. And energy comes from the food that we eat. We've already looked at this when we were looking at feeding relationships, but the first type of animal we have, or we're going to look at, is a herbivore. Remember, a herbivore is an animal that eats plant only. And there we have a giraffe as an example. A carnivore, animals that eat other animals. So they eat other animals or they eat meat only. And there we have a lion as an example of that. Omnivore. An omnivore is an animal that eats both plants and animals. So that's what an omnivore is. And we have a gorilla there as an example. A scavenger is an animal that eats dead plants and animals. So these animals, they don't hunt for themselves. In fact, they don't hunt, they eat what is left what others have already caught. So if a lion catches, for example, it's caught an impala and it doesn't finish eating and it leaves, then a scavenger can come to eat the remainder of what the lion did not finish. And then the last group of animals is what we call decomposers. And these are animals that eat dead plants and animals, and then they return the nutrients, or they break down that animal or plant, and they take the nutrients back into the soil. And that's how the plant then gets its nutrients from the soil. Now for an activity, number 1. So you'll answer in the chat bar or raise your hand, and we can then see if you have understood the answer, the question. So number 1, name 3 things that plants need to make their own food. 3 things. Pearl.
So they need what do you call this, water?
Water.
They also need carbon dioxide
Carbon dioxide.
and energy from the sun.
And they need energy from the sun. Yes, well done. Number 2, what do we call the process that plants use to make their own food? Charlton. Charlton. Charlton.
He is unmuted. I don't know why he's not responding.
Teresa.
Photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis. Yes, you even said the word properly. Well done. Yes, correct, Lutando. I see you also answered the photosynthesis. Number 3, define omnivore. Define the word omnivore and give an example of an omnivore. Ziama?
An omnivore is like an animal that eats plants and meat. So for an example, I would say humans.
Example? Humans. Perfect example. Yes, well done. That is a perfect example. So humans are omnivores because we eat both meat and we eat plants. Unless if you're a vegetarian or a vegan and then you just told yourself that you don't want to eat meat. But generally, plants and animals, humans eat both plants and animals. The last question, which is a question I asked yesterday, and people said they're gonna do research. Hey. Is a Venus flytrap an animal or a plant? Is a Venus flytrap an animal or a plant? Dante.
A Venus flytrap is actually a carnivorous plant, so it's actually a plant.
So it's not an animal.
Yeah.
So it's a carnivore, but it's a plant.
Yeah.
So it makes its own food and it also eats other things.
Yep.
Yes, that is very correct. So a Venus flytrap is both a plant and an animal, but as Dante put it, it's what we call a carnivorous plant. So it's a plant because it's green, as you can see, and it undergoes the process of photosynthesis. So it will need sunlight, it will need water, and it will need to get carbon dioxide so that it can make its own food. On top of that, so it gets double, it eats 2 ways. And the second way, you can see that bee inside there is trapped, or it's eating that bee, and that is what we call it being a carnivore. So what happens is it will eat up an insect or a spider, and once it's inside, it releases an enzyme or a chemical that will break down that animal into very small parts, which are the nutrients that it needs. And then it will take that in and it will use it to grow. So that's how a Venus flytrap actually gets its food. Next part of the topic. So we're looking at a food chain, Faith, your hand is up.
How does it swallow?
So it doesn't swallow because it doesn't have a throat. So what it does is after the enzymes or the chemical is broken down, then those nutrients that it has broken down the insect into are taken into, so it uses a process called osmosis, where it takes in the food that it got or the nutrients that it got from that insect. And then it goes down to the body and it helps it grow, just like you and I are eating. Just that there's no stomach and other parts of the body that we have. Are we cool?
Neo, there's just two people in the comment section that's stating that they don't understand. I'm not sure exactly what it is that they don't understand. I will unmute one of them just to explain. Sholton's iPad, you've been unmuted.
Okay. Charlton?
Okay, he's not saying anything. Let me see. The other person was
Okay.
Kagiso. Just
Yes,
see if I can
Carriso?
unmute.
Carriso?
Kagiso.
It's fine, we can get back to them.
Okay.
Okay, sure. So, a food chain. So remember we said animals eat, and they don't just eat. There's actually a way that we can use to see how these animals actually get to eat. And we use what we call a food chain. A food chain is a diagram that describes, so it's a description of how each living thing gets its food or gets its nutrients. And this shows how the energy is passed on from one living thing to another. That's how a food chain works. A food chain works in a way where it will show us the movement of energy from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. Remember, we are focusing on how energy is being moved throughout the plant, or not the plant, throughout the process from one living thing to the next and how it gets its energy. To draw a proper food chain, you need to use an arrow. So between each organism you're gonna write, you must put in an arrow to show which animal eats the other, or to show where the energy is going to. So we use an arrow, not a line. I've seen a lot of people who draw food chains using a line. A line is not going to make sense because a food chain is supposed to show us the movement. And if you don't use an arrow, there is no movement that we are able to see from that. So make sure that we have an arrow. When you draw your food chain, you make sure that you have an arrow to show us how the food is moving from one thing to the other. I'm sorry, Mpilo, I will slow down. So a food chain, remember, is a diagram that describes how each living thing gets its food. A food chain will show us how energy is passed on from one living thing to another living thing. So that's what a food chain is going to do. It will show us, so this one is eating this one. So the energy is moving from here, going towards to this one. This one then eats, this one is then eaten by this one. The food chain continues to show us the next thing. So that's how a food chain actually works. In a food chain, you will always start with the producer. Remember what I said the producer is? Which one is the producer? Which one is the producer? What do we mean when we talk about a producer? Kabel?
The sun.
No. Producer. Jordan?
The water.
No. Mdu? Mbu?
It's up.
The what? Guys, it means you were not listening earlier on. We just spoke about, yes, thank you, Nakala, thank you, Lindogu, Tunzi, thank you. Yes, and the producer is the plant. Thank you. So you always start with the plant. You do not start with an animal because remember, the first thing you start with is a producer, and a producer is a plant. So You start with your plant, and then the next thing you will show us is a herbivore or an omnivore. So obviously you have to show us something that eats a plant. You can't now say grass and say lion, because a lion does not eat grass. And then from there on, after showing us the herbivore or the omnivore, then you will show us a carnivore or an omnivore or a scavenger. So it will now depend on you, because remember, all these they eat meat, and all these they eat plants. So this one will eat this one, and these ones will eat that one. A quick example is here. We're going to look at this statement. This statement, it says, a cow eats grass and a human eats a cow. How would our flow chart look? How would our food chain look for this? A cow eats grass and a horse eats a cow. So I want you to draw that food chain. In your book, draw a food chain showing a cow eats grass and a human eats a cow. Lihuma, your hand is up.
Sir,
Yes.
I was asking how does the fly trap attract the fly to its mouth?
It's colorful.
sir,
Yes. Yes. Pearl?
when we were doing this in class, they told us that whenever we do a food chain, it's always, or a food web, it's always important that we have to use the arrows, otherwise we're gonna get it wrong.
Yes, that's what I was also saying. If you don't have an arrow, it's gonna be wrong because it doesn't make sense. You are just saying this is going there, but you need to show us direction. So the arrow will show us the direction. So I see someone who has answered here. Okay, praise. Cow, no, grass, cow, human. Okay, all right, let's see. So there, we first start with grass and then arrow. If you don't have an arrow, guys, it's not gonna be a correct food chain. It needs to have an arrow. Next, a cow. So in your time trying to find how can I can't even draw a cow. Don't draw pictures. You see how this one is here. Just write words. Grass, arrow, cow, arrow, human. Because you are going to waste your time trying to draw pictures, and some pictures are not even going to make sense. So do not waste your time trying to draw a picture. Instead, just write the words and an arrow next to it so that you can show us that you actually understand. It's not about drawing abilities, because we know other people can draw. I'm also bad at drawing, so I wouldn't expect someone else to be drawing. Well done, Kelly and Nikita and Mpilo. But Mpilo, remember what I said, no pictures, no pictures. We're using words. Now, many food chains that have been linked together are what we call a food web. Pearl has already spoken about that, and we're going to look at a food web right now to see what the difference is between a food web and a food chain. So on your right there, or on your left, I'm not sure which side it is when it comes to your side, but there we have a food web. And you can see a food web is made up of many different food chains. I'm gonna show you only one food chain from this. So here we have leaf, arrow, caterpillar, arrow, snake, arrow, hawk. So this is one food chain. This whole thing is one food chain. Because in reality, leaves are not, or grass is not only eaten by a caterpillar. Grass can be eaten by a lot of different things. For example, we have the grass is eaten by a grasshopper. And a grasshopper is eaten by a bird called a blue jay. A blue jay is eaten by an owl. That is another food web, a food chain. So you can see that in this food web, we have so many different food chains. Now, if you are to draw a food chain from this, you would say something like this. You'd say grass. Grass is eaten by a rabbit. Rabbit is eaten by a hawk. A hawk is eaten by an owl. So you can see this that I've just done now is coming from here. We have grass eaten by a rabbit, eaten by a hawk. So you can clearly see your food chains from your food web. So that is the food web. Now, quick activity again. Please use arrows this time again. Use arrows. Question number 1. Use the following organisms to draw a food chain. Number 1, a zebra, a cheetah, grass. Quickly, food chains, please. Food chains, food chains. Draw your food chains. Faith. Faith.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, I wanted to ask that for the food chain, don't you use the sun?
You don't have to. There's no need.
Beginning.
There's no need.
Yes, sir.
Sharp. I'm waiting for answers. Okay, I see there Nikita, grass, zebra, cheetah. Yes, very, very correct. And your arrows are very nice and clear there. So we have grass, zebra, and then a cheetah. Well done. You guys are doing so well. The next one, snail, eagle, rat, beetle, lettuce. Let's see. Snail, eagle, rat, beetle, lettuce. How would you do that one? Why are there no answers for number 2? Is it that difficult? Kelly. 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 Listen. Answer. Okay. Okay, Mtunzi has something there. Mtunzi says lettuce, rat, beetle, eagle, snail. No. Lutando, lettuce, snail, beetle, rat, eagle. Nokolo, lettuce, snail, beetle, rat, eagle. Yes, that is the correct order. That is the correct order. So we start with lettuce, which is eaten by a snail. A snail eats only vegetables, so it is a herbivore. And a beetle will then eat a snail. A rat will then eat the beetle. And lastly, an eagle will eat a rat. So all those who said lettuce, snail, beetle, rat, eagle, well done. Now, we are going to look at a food web and answer some questions on that. A, this is the food web in front of us. A says, name one herbivore. Name one herbivore from this food web. Don't just name J. Teresho? Teresho?
Sorry, I did a mistake. I did a mistake.
Okay, no problem. Chloe? Chloe? One herbivore from here, from this food web.
A lion.
Herbivore.
Lion.
What is a herbivore? What is a herbivore?
Animal that eats plants.
Yes, so does the lion eat
Wait.
plants?
Sir. Sir. Sir.
Yes, talk.
It's a rabbit.
A rabbit, okay. Tabo? Yes. A rabbit. Guys, there's more. Oh, there are like 5 or 6 here, if I'm not lying. Lehumo? Lehumo. A goat, yes. Kopano?
A rabbit.
A rabbit, yes. So we've got a rabbit, we've got a mouse, we've got a goat. So these 3 here, these 3 animals here are our herbivores because they are eating the green plant. All of them are eating from the green plant. Number 2, what is the producer in the food web? What is the producer here? Which one is the producer? Yes, praise, Nakolo, well done. It's the tree, the tree, the tree, the tree is the producer. And lastly, name 2 carnivores. 2 carnivores. 2 carnivores in this food web of ours. 2 carnivores. Okay, an owl, a lion. Actually, there are a lot. So all these animals here, let me change my color. Let me use blue. So all these animals here, all of these, yes, all of them are all carnivores. Sadly here, there's no example of a omnivore, but sometimes they'll ask you, find the omnivore. So all you do is just look at the arrows. If it's an omnivore, obviously it's eating both plants and animals. So you'd have to find an arrow coming from the plant going to that animal, and also coming from another animal going to that animal. So that would then show you an example of what we call an omnivore. Now we are looking at life cycles. We all get to live for a certain time, and we all have a life cycle. Both animals and plants, there's a certain time of life that we have, and we call that a life cycle. And it only actually becomes a proper life cycle if it includes from the time you were born until the time you die, and the cycle then continues. Yeah, so that is what we call a life cycle. Plants and animals grow and develop throughout this life cycle. So in a life cycle, you will have plants and animals growing and developing or changing into something else. For example, think of yourself when you were still a baby. Okay, I don't know if you remember how you looked, but if you look at pictures of yourself when you were still a baby, you don't look the same way you looked then, unless if you have not changed much. But most of us, we don't look the same. You are bigger than what you were. Right now, your parents can't carry you on their lap or carry you on their back because you're so heavy. So you've changed, and so you've grown and you've also developed. You couldn't write your name when you were born, but now you can write your name. You couldn't answer certain questions when you were still a child, but now you can. So that shows that as you grow, you also develop throughout your life. Now, adult plants and animals need to reproduce offspring. The reason we have babies is because we need to make more of ourselves. We don't want to get to a point where we are not enough in the world. So that's what we call to reproduce. To reproduce is to have babies or to make babies. So we keep making babies so that we can have more of ourselves. Even plants do the same thing. That's why plants have seeds, so that we can keep having plants and we don't reach a point where we no longer have plants because plants are not reproducing. Now, here's a simple example of a life cycle of a human being. You start as a baby, you become a toddler, then a child, then a teenager where you become a problem and no one likes you. And then you become an adult where you can make money and take care of other people. And lastly, you're an old person where everyone loves you because you give them sweets when they come to visit you. So this is an example of a life cycle. That's why we keep having children throughout, so that we don't die out and we don't reach a point where we say human beings are no longer around because we don't have enough human beings anymore, or people have not been making babies. Now, a life cycle of a plant, it has 4 processes. We have the process of germination, maturing. We have the process of pollination, and the process of dispersal. Now, we're going to look at where each of these things take place. Oh, and we have the process of growing, which happens throughout. So from the moment the seed is made till the time it grows, it keeps growing throughout. So one, we start with a seed, then it grows into a seedling, which then grows into an adult plant, which grows into a flower, and it becomes a fruit which has seeds inside, and the cycle goes on and on and on and on and on. Now, we spoke about the process of germination. The process of germination is the process whereby a seed changes into a seedling. A seed changes into a seedling when all the conditions are correct. If it has proper soil, proper sunlight, proper water, and the temperature around it is correct or it's proper, then it can grow into a seedling. A seedling will then mature. So we don't say a seedling grows, we call it maturing. So a seedling will mature into an adult plant, and an adult plant will then produce flowers. Those flowers, for those flowers to turn into fruits, they have to undergo the process of pollination. Remember, pollination is when the pollen is moved from the male part of the plant or of the flower to the female part of the flower so that we can produce fruit. Then we have our fruits being produced. And after we have our fruits, then we have the process of dispersal, which is when seeds are thrown around or moved around to different new places. Animals also have life cycles. And the life cycle that we're gonna, or the animals we're gonna focus on are vertebrates, which are animals that have backbones. Because within vertebrates, they all have actually a lot of different types of ways of living. And they actually have a lot of things that go on. So we're just gonna focus on vertebrates. And they have a simpler life cycle. That's why we focus mainly on them. The life cycle is simple. You become a baby, a young adult, a mature adult, done. So that is how a life cycle of an animal works. You have a baby, which turns into a young adult, and then it turns into a mature adult, and then it dies. There are 5 processes that are involved in a life cycle of an animal. There's growing, there's maturing, there's mating, there's reproducing, and there's dying. Again, growing happens throughout the whole cycle. Now, you can see there's the process of mating. This is where 2 adult animals will come together to make a baby, and then they will reproduce. And to reproduce means to make a baby, as we spoke about. If animals are what we call mammals, remember, mammals are kinds of vertebrates. They reproduce by giving birth. So people, dogs, cats, and they don't lay eggs. We don't lay eggs. You did not come out from an egg. You were born. So we give birth. And that's how we have our reproducing, or how animals reproduce, by giving birth. Birds and reptiles, on the other hand, they lay eggs. So that's why we eat chicken eggs, and we have ostrich eggs, and we have crocodile eggs. All those are because the way they reproduce, they have to lay eggs. So other vertebrates will lay eggs, other vertebrates will give birth. And then there we have the process of growing, which I said takes place throughout. So you can see there we have our egg. After the process of reproducing, we have an egg being produced by a chicken, which then goes on to hatch and become a chick, and it grows into into a bigger chick, and then later on it grows into an adult, and adults then mate and they reproduce to create more eggs. So that's how the life cycle of a chicken goes about. There I've also given you an example of a life cycle of a dog, which are animals that most of us know. I'll start it where, let me start it here with the adult. So an adult dog will then meet another adult dog, and then they mate, and then they will then reproduce to create puppies, and they're so cute and we like them. And then the puppy will then grow, and then it grows into a young adult or an adolescent, and then later it grows into an adult where it mates with another dog, and then they create puppies, and so goes the process on and on and on and on. Now, the last activity, number one, what kind of vertebrates lay eggs? What kind of vertebrates lay eggs? Which ones? Which vertebrates would you say
Have unmuted
lay
Zinhle.
eggs? Yes, Zinhle? Yes,
She has muted herself.
Zinhle? Okay. Tabo? A snake? Yes, a snake. Anything else? But remember, I'm saying which kind. Remember, we have 5 kinds of vertebrates. It's a bird, it's a fish, it's a reptile, it's a mammal, and which ones lay eggs? That's the question. Which ones will lay eggs? Kabelo.
A bear.
A bird lays eggs, yes. Another one. Let me see. Someone have not taken. Yes, Nathan.
What's this? A crocodile.
A crocodile. Okay, that's an example of a type of animal. Which type of animal is that?
Maybe an alligator or just a crocodile.
Okay. Pilasande?
Reptiles.
Reptiles, yes. So what he was talking about is a reptile. So crocodile is a kind of an animal or kind of vertebrate called a reptile. There's another one, there's one last group that you have not spoken about that lays eggs. Which other group lays eggs? Naledi?
An ostrich.
What type of animal is an ostrich? Is an ostrich a mammal? Is an ostrich a reptile? Is an ostrich a bird? Is an ostrich a fish? Faith.
So, a catfish.
A catfish. Okay, yes, that's a fish. It's a kind of fish. All right. Number 2, name the 5 stages in the life cycle of a plant. Name the 5 stages in a life cycle of a plant. 5 stages in a life cycle of a plant. 5 stages in a life cycle of a plant.
Sir,
Pearl.
germinating.
That's a process, it's not a stage.
Oh. Sorry, sir.
Stages, guys, stages. Yes, Nathan.
You get a seedling. You get a seedling.
Yes, a seed.
Older, a young adult. And then it grows into a fruit, and then it goes back.
Think again. Think you were almost there and then you tripped over the last
Flower. Flower.
Go back to the beginning. Go back to the beginning. What's the first one?
Seed.
Yes.
Seed. Seedling.
Mm-hmm.
Adult plant.
Mm-hmm.
Flower and fruit.
Yes. So those are the 5. A seedling, well done. A seedling, a seed, which will then germinate and become a seedling, which will grow or mature into an adult plant. And that adult plant will produce flowers. And through pollination, it will then create fruits, which are then dispersed. And then we have our plant growing everywhere. The last question, what does the word germination mean? What does the word germination mean? Germination. Germination. Buhle. Buhle. What does the word germination mean? Still thinking, we'll give you time. And listen.
The process of something coming into existence and developing.
Something. I don't like the word something.
The process of a plant.
Plant doing what?
The seed turning into a plant.
Yes, thank you. Oh gosh. A seed, when a seed goes into the soil and it has the right amount of water, the right amount of sunlight, the right amount of nutrients, and the right amount of carbon dioxide, then it will germinate, meaning it will grow into a seedling. So that's the process where a seed turns into a seedling. And just like that, this is the end of this lesson. So this is the end of the lesson. Just to recap quickly, green plants make their own food using the process called photosynthesis. This is where energy, carbon dioxide, water are used to produce oxygen and food for the plants. Animals eat other things to get their energy. So they can eat other animals or they can eat plants to get their energy. We represent the movement of energy using what we call a food chain. All plants and animals have a life cycle that they have to go through. The life cycle of plants is the following: a seed, seedling, adult plant, flower, fruit. And the life cycle of animals is from a baby to a young adult to a mature adult. And that is literally it. So if you see here, there are links that you can actually go to find more information, nice videos and animations to help explain the process of photosynthesis, food chains, and life cycles. And as usual, I'm going to open 2 minutes for questions before we close off today's lesson. I'll start with Nathan.
Okay, this is not like usually anybody can say, but then what's this? Was that plant that was eating a bug? Is it like capturing like that?
Yes, that's exactly how it eats. It's like chewing the plant, the bug. Yes.
But then it does not have teeth.
No, it doesn't. So the chemicals are the ones that break it down for
so it goes like
it goes once, and then after it closes, it releases the chemical to break down the insect into smaller parts. So it doesn't do this. It does it once to catch.
Like this.
Yes. Buhle, your hand is up.
So, what do you mean about germinating?
So germinating is after you've taken your seed and you've put it in the soil. If it gets all the right conditions, then it grows. And then you start seeing the small plants. That's what we call germination.
Okay, so thank you.
All right. Pearl.
So about the fly trap, does it ever get old, or how does it normally capture the flies or any bug?
Yes, it does get old and it captures at the moment an insect lies on top of that red part, which is the
Yes, sir.
inside of the mouth, then it closes and that's how it catches its food.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right. Any more hands? Let me just see. Faith, your hand is up.
Sir,
Yes.
so I wanted to ask that for the photosynthesis, we say that photo is light, and
Mhm.
synthesis, I forgot what it is. I wanted
It
to write
means
it down,
process.
but then.
Process.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you,
Cabello?
sir.
Sir, does it
Cabello.
swallow?
No,
Does
it
that
doesn't.
plant swallow?
No, it doesn't because it doesn't have a throat. So it takes it in through a process called osmosis.
Okay,
Dante.
sir.
With one of the questions with activity 2, I was going to say platypus because they're the only mammal that lays eggs.
A what?
A platypus
A
for
platypus.
yeah, which
Yes,
is the only
yes.
mammal
It
that
is the
can
only
lay
mammal
eggs.
that lays eggs. Yes, true. That is very true. Well done. I saw another hand before I say goodbye. Pila Sande?
Sir, I have 2 questions.
Okay,
First one,
quickly.
is the fly trap venomous?
Yes. Next.
And what? I forgot now. Hey.
Okay, Tavo?
Sir, what time are we going to meet tomorrow?
Yes, that's what I'm going to make an announcement on right now. Okay, so listen, guys. Any more questions? As I told you, please do send a message to me on the Facebook, né? Because this is my last time seeing you. Next week, we're going to be with someone else. Tomorrow, there are no classes because it's a public holiday. Monday, there's no class. It's another public holiday. So your next lesson will be again on Tuesday, 12 o'clock on Tuesday. If anything changes, just go to Africa Teen Gigs on Facebook to get more information.
Oh.
And my name on Facebook is this. You see this is on Facebook. So you can actually send a message there and I will respond to all your messages because right now my time is up and I have a lot of hands that are going up and I would love to answer them, but it's cut, it's going. So if you have a question, Neo Mashilo on Facebook, go to Messenger, send me a message and I will make sure to respond to all your messages. Remember, no classes tomorrow, no classes on Monday. Next classes are starting on Tuesday. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy your English and your maths classes and whatever else you're having after this. Bye.